known the Earth as a globe since at least 1482, since we still have Martin Eardapfel's actual globe, shown for real here, 62 years before the 1540 formation of the Jesuits you claim invented this model. A great point, and I noticed that Africa, Southern Europe, and a small bit of the Middle East to Western India take up half of the entire Earth on his globe. So I wondered how the other 3/4 of the known Earth fit on the backside of this globe. So I found an antique map dealer who has the entire thing. There's the front side we saw. The back side of the globe is East India into Southeast Asia and Indonesia, up to Tartaria, but that's none of my business, with Southeast Asia mapped out almost as large as Africa. So the red is one half the globe, the yellow is the other half of the globe, and even though Southeast Asia in yellow is just east of Africa in red, apparently if you sail due west from Africa, you come right back to Southeast Asia across the ocean. So everything in red just doesn't exist. But some guy in 1482 fit everything in blue and green on a basketball in a metal stand, and that's how they knew we live on a globe? How, pray tell, did they map out this globe and miss 3/4 of everything on it? Because, Steve, you idiot, they didn't discover the West until Columbus in 1498, when he sailed for the West Indies. 16 years after this globe proved there was no West Indies. Then why did he bother sailing west just to get back to Indonesia? So you need to shut up and stop claiming the ancients thought we lived on a globe, as the oldest globe we have is as recent as 1482 and was not even 1/3 of the known Earth all the way around it. You can't map an alleged globe you've never even been around to clearly see it's wrong and impossible. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Antarctica, the coldest, most savage place on Earth. So remote, its very existence was questioned by navigators for centuries. Even after it was discovered in 1820, it remained for decades terra incognita, a land unknown.
Really? A land unknown until its discovery in 1820? That's interesting because even on this fake 1482 globe, right under the Tropic of Capricorn, it says clearly Circulus Antarcticus, the Antarctic Circle. A strange name for a latitude boundary to a place that doesn't allegedly get discovered until 340 years later, showing precisely where its outer latitude ring is. Of course, there is no fantasy ice continent drawn there, but they knew the circle. In fact, it's also clearly mapped out just like Gleason's ice wall on the 1766 Duil de Lisle flat earth map as Terra Antarcticus, not Terra Incognito, 54 years before the alleged 1820 discovery of Antarctica. I wonder if we're being lied to about history. To recap parts 1 and 2, in order to propagate the Jesuit heliocentric cosmology and globe model, it has to have a period of constant 24-hour sun months in late October through early February down on Fantasy Island, aka Antarctica, just as it provably does in the northern Arctic Circle, where people actually live and witness this reality provably in the summer months of May through August, because the alleged south tip of the globe has to point at the sun on the same 23-degree tilt angle for its summer months as the alleged north tip of the globe does on its summer months. On the globe model, what happens in latitude rings stays in latitude rings, even its opposite alleged northern and southern latitude ring counterparts. So let's set the groundwork for how this globe fraud and scam work in modern days via the digital Santa Claus fiction known as satellite GPS, or Global Positioning System. Though not a globe projection, Gleason's map is still a partial projection map, as it says clearly on top, with instructions on the back that modern copies do not have, so very few flat earthers have seen it. So when it says scientifically and practically correct as it is, it means as a longitude and time calculator, as it says clearly on the top left. It does not mean that the Earth geometrically looks exactly like this, in this shape and proportion from an overhead view. Our east-west longitude system could not be developed using heavenly luminaries for east or west navigation without clocks, since they are constantly moving east to west, so you can't head in the direction of a moving object. So it was developed for navigation based on fictional fixed clock times and time zones based on a 2D rectangular grid projection of the fictional spherical globe model. At least you can find north with a compass or North Star Polaris by night, which never moves. But try finding your way north without a compass by Polaris. If it was flying over your head from north to south behind you as you tried to follow it north, you wouldn't know which way to go. Both circles and spheres have curved lines that do not intersect all latitude and longitude lines at perfect 90-degree square angles. But since the latitude and longitude system is set up that way, both models have to distort their proportions with projections to accommodate that fiction. The globe does it this way, Gleason had to do it this way, in order to fit the world's already existing almanac latitude-longitude coordinates for all places onto this circle, instead of inventing an entirely new system and coordinates that nobody is using. Both the globe and Gleason are using 69 regular miles per degree of latitude from the North Pole to either South Pole or outer ice wall on Gleason's map. So compared to almanac latitude grids, Gleason's continents are drawn in correct proportion lengthwise from inside to out. But longitudinally, the globe model's longitude lines converge closer together in distance as they head from the equator towards the theoretical South Pole and Fantasy Island, so their southern continents are always drawn skinny and pointy to accommodate this. Gleason's longitude lines have to diverge the entire way out from the North Pole to accommodate the existing fictional latitude-longitude grid, so a degree of longitude at the Tropic of Cancer is roughly 51 miles across, while that same degree at the equator is now 69 miles across, then 87 miles across at the Tropic of Capricorn, and roughly 138.5 miles at the outer ice wall. So his continents have to be drawn or projected fatter and wider as you go further out or south to fit the fictional grid. So they are not in proportion to their latitude like the globe. The truth of what the Earth actually looks like from overhead is probably somewhere in the middle of both models. That is why you can calculate a longitude distance this way if you have the formula, or even a latitude distance in yellow this way at 69 miles per degree, but you can't just measure this way, the purple line, because the latitude difference remains constant while the longitude difference is changing proportionately. Without using advanced trigonometry calculations using comparative distance ratios to a fixed point like the North Pole. But whereas on the diverging Gleason map, one longitude degree on the Tropic of Capricorn is 87 miles wide, on the converging globe, it has to be only 63 miles wide, which does not match actual reality. And that is where the digital magic of GPS and Google Earth comes into play. Those of us dinosaurs old enough remember David Copperfield using magic to make the Statue of Liberty disappear in real time on live TV. It seemed impossible. What we didn't know was that the entire audience floor and stage with fixed cameras was slowly rotating away from the statue while the curtain was up. So when the curtain was pulled down, the frame around the curtain was no longer facing the Statue of Liberty. That same sleight of hand magic today is now called GPS and Google Earth. And here's how they do it. Remember, you don't need to manipulate the north or inside. It already mirrors the globe fantasy with converging longitude lines into the north center. It's the south you have to manipulate. Back both long before and in the 1880s and 90s, latitude circles to determine north-south position of the equator were found using a combination of solar declination tables showing the sun's visual angle at noon above the horizon at various dates on the ecliptic as it goes between the tropics of Cancer to the equator to Capricorn and back, along with Mariner's astrolabes as shown on the left, backstaffs like the Davis quadrant on the right, octants on the left, and sextants on the right, in use up until modern GPS and Google Earth. However, longitude to determine east-west position was much more difficult, if not impossible, as seen here on this 1683 nautical chart by Montier, as it cannot be determined by astronomical observations in the sky like latitude can. It required centuries of study and invention to invent a fictional prime meridian line and then a way to coordinate clocks at different distant places using instruments like the chronometer, then the telegraph, and later radio to synchronize clocks. But more importantly, centuries of astronomical societies, nautical societies, and guilds sharing and compiling these observations and information were put into massive nautical almanacs like these two, the American Ephemeris and Nautical Almanacs of 1889 and 1891 by the United States Naval Observatory. Over 850 pages that helped sailing vessels for centuries get to where they wanted to go at any time of the year, with most of the painstaking work already calculated for them. In 1889, all of these almanacs agreed that Hammerfest, Norway was located at 70 degrees 45 minutes north latitude, and sailors and trade ships were getting to and fro there just fine using these almanacs. But it was also known that in Hammerfest, Norway, there is a continual 24-hour sun in their summer, from May 11th to July 22nd, 2 months and 10 days. Today, that can still be seen, though once again, the almighty accurate globe software can't agree within 2 days if it starts May 12th or May 14th, or if it finishes July 30th or 31st. But either way, there is a 24-hour sun. Which means if we live on a globe, there has to be 2 months and 10 days or close of 24-hour sun at 70 degrees 45 minutes south latitude in their summer months of November, December, and January. If there isn't, then we don't live on a globe, and icy fantasy island cannot exist. So Gleason wrote to Professor J. Morrison of the Nautical Almanac Office, Bureau of Navigation, Navy Department in Washington, D.C., the guy in charge of these almanacs, to check if that 24-hour sun was happening at 70 degrees 45 minutes south latitude as well. Morrison replied, on December 21st and 22nd, there's summer solstice down there, at South Shetland, about 70 degrees south latitude, see any good map of the world. The sun rises 2 hours, 3 minutes, 30 seconds. The sun sets 9 hours, 56 minutes, 30 seconds. A total of 19 hours and 53 minutes as the longest continued day. That's 4 hours and 7 minutes of no sun, where its northern latitude twin counterpart Hammerfest, Norway, is having 24-hour sun on their June 21st summer solstice. Morrison continues, reverse the results for June 22nd at South Shetland's winter solstice, and we shall have for June 21st and 22nd, sunrise is 9 hours, 56 minutes, 30 seconds, sunsets 2 hours, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, total 7 hours and 53 minutes as the shortest continued day. That's 7 hours and 53 minutes of visible sun in the sky that it shouldn't be having, since its northern twin latitude Hammerfest on their December 21st solstice is in the middle of several months of 24 hours of no sun in the sky at all, with the sun never climbing above 4 degrees below their horizon at their solar noon on their December 21st winter solstice. Morrison finishes by stating the above results are for the sun's upper limb, meaning the very top part of the sun that is first and last to be seen coming up over and setting over the horizon, or for the very first and last rays or sunlight, and are absolutely correct. These were obviously globe killers that nobody wanted to address, because if you were getting 4 hours and 7 minutes of no sun in the sky at 70 degrees south latitude in the dead of their summer solstice, there is no way in hell on a globe that all of these coastal bases even further north at 68 and 69 degrees south latitude could be claiming to have 2+ months of 24-hour sun, as was covered in parts 1 and 2. The globe model demands everything inside of that ring would be getting more and more days of alleged 24-hour sun. So if that ring has 4 hours of no sun at 70 degrees, none of those bases along the coast outside of that ring could possibly be having months of 24-hour sun. So it was GPS and later its digital fictional counterpart Google Earth to the rescue. Now, instead of the South Shetlands being at 70 degrees south latitude, as the good Professor Morrison assured us any good almanac or map of the world would confirm and are absolutely correct, Google Earth and GPS now claim the South Shetlands are actually at 62.5 degrees south latitude, not 70. Remember, 1 degree of latitude is 69 miles, so we are to believe the incredibly detailed almanacs at the time were mistaken by 517 miles? How were all of those British, Spanish, and Chilean mariners and Scandinavian sealers getting there and back accurately from 1819 to 1993 if their sea charts were off by 517 miles from modern GPS? Admittedly, the Globers' favorite exercise is mental gymnastics to make sense of nonsense, so they will say that modern satellite globe mapping from high above in space has made modern longitude and latitude calculation much more accurate than centuries of combined sailing observations and calculations from the ground. In other words, for Morrison to say the world's maps and almanacs said the South Shetlands were at 70 degrees south latitude, 517 miles south of where GPS and Google Earth now claim they are today. In other words, they thought it was down here in the green instead of up here in red. Nearly 3 extra days of sailing each way and not noticing the giant Antarctic peninsula on or in the way. That's like saying that those almanacs were so inaccurate that they mistakenly thought San Francisco back in 1889 was 517 miles south actually, where San Diego is today. Yet somehow by accident, the steamer and clipper ships had been getting to San Francisco perfectly without error since at least the 1840s, not missing it by 517 miles south. Also, modern GPS and Google Earth still have Hammerfest, Norway at 70 degrees 32 minutes north latitude, almost exactly where the almanacs in 1889 had it, at 70 degrees 45 minutes north latitude. So why isn't that now off by 517 miles as well? Once again, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. We're to believe there are GPS satellites up in anywhere from alleged low Earth orbit 2,000 kilometers away taking detailed pictures of the Shetland Islands. while traveling at 17,224 miles per hour to 15,435 miles per hour, which no camera shutter speed in history can do without a giant streaky blur, up until the very recent Sony A9 III, Samsung S23 Ultra, and now the 2024 INRS Scarf, and not even far away enough to get in scale the Earth around it to itself. Or they claim they're in medium Earth orbit at 20,400 kilometers away, where you can allegedly at least see the Earth's alleged 12,756 kilometer diameter, but in which case you can't even see the Shetland Islands, let alone film and plot them with a camera moving at 22,370 miles per hour, or even zoom in on them to get detail to the closest meter. But that's okay, because they have geostationary satellites way out at 35,786 kilometers that can see the whole Earth and the Shetland Islands. Well, not really, but at least they aren't moving. Well, they are. They are moving at 6,935 miles per hour. So there not only isn't a shutter speed in the world that can film something at 7,000 miles per hour, but there isn't a zoom in the world that could get in that close and accurate to the meter, even if standing dead still. Don't forget, the Earth is also allegedly spinning at 1,000 miles per hour as well. If only there were just some tiny shred of evidence that space satellites are really just cameras attached to solar panels and balloons flying around in regular low atmosphere. But that's none of my business. Anyway, as we'll prove later, this is just used to hide, distort, and disguise the actual expanding longitude distances on the Gleason flat Earth map as you go south or farther out from the center north point of the flat Earth. And while it is true that the equator runs south of the tip of India, as shown here on the Gleason map of our true Earth, as it even does on this ridiculous 2006 NASA copyrighted image, if the North Pole was really there on a globe, then the South Pole would be down there, and the equator, meaning the equidistant latitude point between these two, would be there in red, where the Tropic of Cancer is shown, not way down there in green. That is clearly not the equidistant diameter point between the top and bottom of this fake CGI globe circle, which they distort in every image to make their reality appear to fit on their impossible fiction. They need to hide all of that massive ice wall, all of that endless ocean, and all of that land outside of the equator or south by squeezing it into an area this big, which is impossible. This is why every fake composite NASA releases of the Earth, you see impossible things, like the United States taking up half the side of the Earth and bigger than South America or even Africa on other NASA fakes. The 1997 globe on top is the same exact size as the 2012 globe under it. So how did the United States quadruple in size in 15 years? There's the United States. Let's turn it to the top of the globe. Now let's rotate it a quarter more so it's in the middle of the other side of the globe. Now a quarter more so it's on the dead bottom of the globe. Now one last rotation to bring it back where it started. And there it isn't. That's India, China, and Russia. Let's turn it again. Surely it must be back by now. Nope, that's Greenland. One more turn and the Earth has gone around 1.5 times its alleged circumference. And there it is. It should have passed once by already and be on the other side again, but that is because they have to add Fantasy Island, which isn't really there. Now, where have we seen that before? Ah yes, there is truly nothing new under the sun. Google Earth is just the digital updated version of this same nonsense back in 1482.
Dismantled and ready for a long sea voyage.
We'll then start the final screening process, and we'll get you to take your extreme cold weather jackets off.
But now, the Anduril team gathers at Christchurch, New Zealand, for the 6-hour flight to Antarctica in a C-17 cargo plane, jam-packed with people and gear.
The Anduril team are taking an ice drill from Christchurch, New Zealand to McMurdo Station off the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica in a C-17 cargo plane. Just to get your bearings, McMurdo is alleged to be down there on the Ross Ice Shelf in the South Pacific Ocean, where New Zealand is, not to be confused with the Rana Ice Shelf up there by the Antarctic Peninsula in the South Atlantic Ocean, where New Zealand is nowhere near. So the obvious route on a globe is a straight shot south from Christchurch, New Zealand to McMurdo Station, which is allegedly around 2,340 miles. The C-17 claims an impressive fully loaded cruising speed of 450 knots or 518 miles per hour. So it could make that distance in 4.5 hours, but obviously goes slower for takeoff and landing. The first question is, on a 6-hour trip, does it take an hour and a half, 45 minutes on each side, or 1/4 of the entire flight time to get up to and come back down from cruising speed for takeoff and landing? The second question is, if this is the shortest flight route from New Zealand, why did the BBC spend a ton of time and money on graphics and a narrative about an alleged mountain range they wouldn't even pass over to show them coming in over the Antarctic Peninsula and Rana Ice Shelf in the South Atlantic Ocean to come all the way back to McMurdo in the South Pacific?
Their flight passes over the Trans-Antarctic Mountains.
That's the Antarctic Peninsula, that's the Rana Ice Shelf, and that's the South Atlantic Ocean,
which divide the continent into two regions, with colossal glaciers called ice sheets blanketing both. The giant East Antarctic ice sheet is 10 times the size of the West. It's frozen firmly to bedrock, high above the sea, and in some places, the ice towers almost 3 miles into the sky.
Why would you even mention any of that if you were supposed to take the yellow route, not their claimed red route? In reality, they really did this. Follow the yellow brick road from Christchurch straight to McMurdo and the real location of the Ross Ice Shelf, as we'll get into with southern longitude impossibilities on the globe model.
Some people call it Earth's freezer, but scientists call Antarctica the ice.
Antarctica plays a fundamental role in the way the Earth functions.
For polar researchers, Antarctica is a giant laboratory more than 1.5 times the size of the United States, and home to 90% of all the ice in the world.
I would definitely agree on the Gleason map that the ice wall is at least 90% of all the ice in the world and plays a fundamental role in the way the Earth functions by holding in and containing the waters of the realm. But that ice wall is clearly a hell of a lot more than just 1.5 times the size of that tiny little United States. When we use the tool to trace out anywhere in the world on Google Earth, like the United States seen in yellow around it, we can get a rough perimeter and area, like here, showing the United States to have a perimeter of roughly 9,361 miles and an area inside of that about 3.1 million square miles. And yet, funny enough, the only place on all of Google Earth you aren't allowed to do that is, surprise, surprise, Fantasy Island, Antarctica. It suddenly draws in this fictional circle, both outside of the alleged coastal area you traced in detail, and even way inside where you traced, and gives you a perimeter of 11,550 miles, much less than the alleged 1.5 times the United States, 9,361 miles, short by 2,500 miles, and gives you an area of 5 million square miles, which is 350,000 square miles more than it should be, not less. But how does that work? And they won't tell you if that's the fake circle they drew or the outline you did, as they leave it up to you and don't clarify. Clearly a deception, because as we've already shown multiple times, this fantasy island cannot and does not exist. And the fact that it clearly has a lie purposely programmed into Google Earth software means you cannot trust it does not have the same deception programmed into tracing southern hemisphere continents to hide their actual size as well, as we'll get into. Even their cover story of how it was theoretically created is ridiculous. Their cool story goes, the Earth's polar regions are cold because their positions at the top and bottom of the planet do not allow them to receive direct light from the sun, even though it is allegedly 93 million miles away and allegedly lights up the entire planets all the way out to Pluto, allegedly 3.7 billion miles farther away from Earth. But since the Earth's alleged axis is tilted at 23.5 degrees, the incoming solar radiation that warms the planet strikes them obliquely rather than vertically. As a result, the poles receive only 40% as much incident radiation as equatorial regions. The rest of that incident radiation goes out to Pluto instead.
To us, it might seem almost a stage awaiting actors. But the human drama came slowly to the icy continent. Antarctica's interior was not reached until the 20th century. Why did it take so long for curious and expansionist peoples to lay claim to this wilderness? The seeds of Antarctica's inaccessibility were sown millions of years ago.
Yet there's your alleged globe, 60 degrees south latitude Antarctic circle in red. Millions of years ago, in scale and proportion, supposed to be frozen due to the alleged 23.5 degree tilt of the Earth blocking 60% of its incident solar radiation. Yet 1/4 of this supercontinent, the entire rest of the Earth as we know it, in that red circle, was magically lush and green?
When the supercontinent, Gondwanaland, drifted apart to form the continents that we recognize today.
Now you can see it more clearly, that white ring there.
The last fragmental piece to break apart was Australia and Antarctica, which broke apart and created the great Southern Ocean, which encircles Antarctica today.
Then why is it lit up like Florida and not already frozen if it was already down there in that 60% deficient solar radiation zone before it allegedly broke apart?
Once Antarctica was surrounded completely by ocean, it cut itself off from the rest of the Earth's weather patterns, and as Antarctica drifted over the South Pole, it became cold and could not receive warmer weather from up north. And so this is really the reason how Antarctica went into the deep freeze about 40 million years ago.
This piece off here and put it over here. And now you see, the United States is no longer in the middle of the map.
Right.
Now I did this with a major record company in New York City, I think in 1970. And an older man stood up in the back of the room and said, "Now Elliot, you've gone too far." I said, "What's your problem?" "You can't do that with the map." I said, "Well, actually you can." He said, "No, the United States isn't in the middle of the map anymore." I said, "The United States never was in the middle of the map. You need to realize this depends on how you draw your map." And then I pointed this little fact out to him. South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
You mean just like the Gleason map here?
Even though it doesn't really look like it.
No, it is. South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
It's crazy.
Now, according to your social studies teachers, what is the equator? Halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole on this map would be right about here.
Right.
And that means that Iowa has a semi-tropical climate.
Yeah.
Well, you've been in Minnesota in the
I've
wintertime.
been in Iowa too. It's definitely
You
not.
know that it doesn't have a tropical climate. So you have to then introduce a real version of the map of the world. That's what this is doing.
Looks very good.
The Peters projection map. The sizes on this map are right. The shapes are distorted.
Yeah.
Look at Greenland on this map. Right there. See it?
Yeah, it's really tiny.
See how small that is?
Right.
Look at it on the Mercator projection.
So why do they do that? I don't understand.
Why? Because the Pope commissioned Mercator to make a map that shows the spread of Christianity. So all the countries in which there are predominantly white people are larger than those in the southern part of the world, halfway between the North Pole and South.
The world map. And this is wrong. What if I told you that from here to here, it's 6,400 kilometers, but from here to here, which only looks like half the size, is 7,200. The continent of Africa has been shown smaller than it actually is. What if I told you that Greenland was only this size? Or Russia was this size? And the US and Canada were not small. You know what? This is the real map. Look at Sweden, Finland, and Norway. They're much smaller now. But Greenland is tiny.
I received a comment from a sub in regard to their trip on the Trans-Australian Railway from Kalgoorlie to Port Augusta across the Newell Arbor Desert. The company itself claims it to be only 650 miles across. Mapping it on Google Earth claims 1,044 miles. Wikipedia says 1,050 miles, and Google itself says 967 miles straight shot across the water, or 1,162 miles driving the Route 1. How does the company think their railroad is 400 miles shorter than everyone else says it is? On Gleason's map, that distance would be 1,520 miles across. That's 358 miles more than Google and 469 miles more than Wikipedia. Why can't anyone agree who is correct, and how could they hide this if Gleason is correct? As they wrote, I took the train across Australia's Newell Arbor Desert and had a sleeper car, which I thought was strange as the desert is not that wide, at least allegedly on the globe with converging longitude lines in the south. When it got dark, the train went faster, so much that I couldn't sleep, so it was loud and bumpy and swaying. I became scared, and the conductor said the train always speeds up at night. I believe they hide the stretched desert, making the Gleason map showing correct. I have talked to people crossing the Newell Arbor Desert by car, and they said it took too long. Planes crossing the width of Australia might not be showing passengers their true speed. Whenever we drove in Western Australia, it took too long and we speeded. I believe their road signs are manipulated to not show their proper distances. This is obviously just hearsay and opinion, but Gleason ran into the same thing provably and factually with actual sea charts and navigation logs from a dozen steamship captains and navigators in the late 1800s, working the steamer ship routes between Cape Town on the southern tip of Africa on the right and Buenos Aires, Argentina, as well as Cape Horn, Chile on the southern tip of South America, as we'll examine shortly in detail. But Dave Weiss and I also ran into the same exact anomaly as Gleason recently that matches every single Antarctic exploration journey on record from the late 1500s to the mid-1900s, which we'll get into, when we recently interviewed a whistleblower from a top-secret multinational mining base nicknamed as Tego, somewhere in the vicinity of McMurdo Station near the Ross Ice Shelf. Deep Throat was taken, so we're calling this person Frostbite.
So I want to start out with tell Steve about your journey as in much detail as you can, where you went from and how you got to the Tigo base.
So I'm like, all right. So I've been watching it freeze my ass for, I don't know, like four weeks and shit. So now we get back, and then we got back for a little bit on orders at the base, and then we went down to Florida. From Florida, we caught a boat. We went down south, down by, I think we stopped over in Colombia, and we caught another boat. And then we went to Antarctica. Went to McMurdo?
Well, McMurdo's on the other side by New Zealand. That's why I was going to ask if you went from New Zealand, because if you were down at the tip of South America, those bases are called Rothera, San Martin, Vernadsky, Mariambo.
No, we didn't go there.
So are you saying you were close to McMurdo?
Yeah.
But you took a boat from the west side of South America or the north or the east side? From Miami, you sailed down what, the east coast of, or did they fly you somewhere?
We went down to Colombia. Yeah. We were port in Cartagena. Then we went to north, south, east, west coast of Colombia.
Okay.
And then we caught another boat there. And we're on that boat for a while, and we ended up at McMurdo.
How long were you on that boat for? Like
a while. This is going back 20 years ago.
Yeah,
Is it
like
days,
10 days
or
or something. Like 10 days or long, 20 days, like approximately.
Oh, it's probably about 2 weeks.
2 weeks on a boat. Okay, yeah.
And what kind of boat was it?
U.S. military boat.
Yeah. And was it making time?
What do you mean making time?
Was it moving fast, or was it just lollygagging?
I just get on the boat. Yeah, I don't.